Good morning. There's a story of a young fellow who fell in love with English literature, the novelists and playwrights and poets. He read the stories and their adventures and was drawn into this deep wisdom and life. He gleaned much for life and living from them. And he loved the study of them. And he went on and progressed and gained a PhD in English literature. And he conformed to the expectations of the culture and the world and the academic environment in which he'd been part of, and went on to become a lecturer in the university on English literature. And he loved the thought of being able to pass on the wisdom and the learning that he had, the wisdom of these great writers over the centuries. And every day he would go into the class and front the students and have some deep, profound thing he wanted to impart, some great passion and joy. And each day in class there would be bored students, people who were disengaged and not interested. The killer for him really was the question, "Hey Doc, is this going to be in our final exam?" And day by day some of his passion and his joy drained from him. He was dying in this atmosphere, in this space. And after a couple of years of this, he'd had enough. He went into the dean's office with a letter of resignation in his hand. He handed it in, he said, "Dean, I quit. I can't do this anymore." And the dean asked him why, and he explained, "I come in with passion and joy and wisdom, and I want to share this wisdom with the students. But they just ask me questions like, is this going to be in the exam?" They're bored, they're uninterested, and every day another part of me just dies. I can't go on. The dean tried to talk him out of it. He tried everything he could and finally said, "Look, you realise if you quit, that's it. You won't have any more chances. This is your last chance, your only chance in university." And the young fellow says, I know what I'm doing. I've got to go. It's killing me." And he did. His mother was really concerned for him, as mothers would be. And she spoke to an older fellow in her congregation, one who was a university lecturer himself, a man of deep wisdom and faith, and said, "Look, will you go and speak to my son? Just go and find out what's going on and maybe talk some sense into him if you can." And so Tony went, and he went and made an appointment and dropped in. He went into the boy's apartment, and it was just filled with all the novels and plays and poets and everything. It was all the great stories and writers were there, and they talked a bit about this. And then he got to the point, he said, "Look, you know why I'm here. Your mum's worried about you. She's asked me to come and talk to you. I understand the university system. What's gone wrong? What's happened?" And the boy explained. He explained that he goes in, he had all this wisdom, this passion, this joy, this hope. He goes to share this wisdom, and students are disengaged. Some are interested, but many aren't. And then they ask that question, "Hey Doc, is this going to be in the final exams?" And he said, every time they ask that and every time I go in, there's a little bit more of me dies. I just can't go on with that. I can't do it anymore. And the older fella says, "I understand exactly what you're saying. I know what you mean. I go there myself. I guess as a sociologist, things are a little bit different. I handle it in different ways, and I've survived in different ways. And I have my work through the church, which gives me that engagement. But I get what you're saying. So you quit. What are you going to do now? You need a job. You're going to have to pay rent for the apartment, food and whatever." And he says, "It's all right. I've got a job." "Oh, what are you doing?" "I'm a postman." "Well, you seem a bit overqualified for that. How's it going? You enjoy it?" He says, "Look, I love it, but I'm a lousy postman." And the older fellow says, "Why? Well, what's gone wrong?" And the young bloke says, "Look, we all get in there about 7 o'clock in the morning. We sort out our mail deliveries, our route, all the deliveries for our route. Then we go out. Others get back around about 2:30, 3 o'clock and tidy up, and then they go home. I never get back before 4:30, 5 o'clock. sometimes later, and I'm always running late. He said, well, why? What? He said, well, what I've discovered is on my route, there are lots of people in lots of different places in life. Some are struggling, some are doing it easy, some are in grief, some are asking all sorts of questions, and many of them don't have anyone to talk to. And so I stop and chat. And of course there's always some wisdom from one of the poets, or a play, or a story, something I can share with them, and I do. And they invite me in for a coffee and we have a chat. And by the end of the day I've had 20 cups of coffee and I struggle to get to sleep. But I'm using the wisdom that I've gleaned, these stories that I love, to share with others. And I love it. And the older lecturer says, professor says, you sound like you've found your calling, your place to be. It sounds wonderful. You just do your best job and I'll talk to your mum. Anyway, he went and talked and fixed it up with the mum, and his mum came back a little bit later and said, you know what's happened? My son just told me that all the people on his rounds got together and they hired the local community hall and they threw a party for him at Christmas to say thank you for what he'd done. It sounds like he's found his place. I really like that story. For me, it's a story of this young bloke who has gained wisdom and insight, who has gleaned something really important in life from these novels and playwrights, the great writers. He's been transformed. There's something within him that's different, that's real. And he wants to share that with the world. But the world, whether it's a university or other, wants to conform him to their system, to their world, to the way they see the world. Squash him in and conform him to the system, the culture, and the expectations of how he should be, what he should do. And it's killing him. And he understands that it's killing him. And rather than conform and give in and do what the world says, he quits and finds his own way, a way that has integrity. I think that's really important and very rare. For all of us, the world around us would have us conform to the way it expects, the status quo, the expectations of what life should be and what we should do. And we find ourselves squashed into the system, giving up something of our being, our self, our soul, to abide by the ways of the world around us. And this week in Luke's story of Jesus, particularly in chapter 17, where we read this fascinating story where Jesus turns his face once again to Jerusalem. He's on this journey from the Galilee in the north to Jerusalem in the south, where he will confront the powers and principalities of the world, where they will take him down, they will kill him and crucify him. And Jesus is heading that way. But it says he walks in the region between Galilee and Samaria. It doesn't make sense geographically. It makes sense metaphorically. Jesus is walking the borderlands between one world and another, between Galilee, the Jewish world, and the Samaritan world. He's walking between the systems and the cultures, as he does with every system and every culture, between the reign of God, which is what he embraces in his being, and the reigns and powers of this world, whatever they look like. And he invites us to walk the borderlands with him, which is what that young man did. He refused to submit to the culture, to be conformed, and instead walked the way that had integrity and depth and character, and drew on the wisdom that he'd gleaned. Furthermore, Jesus goes into a village, and in the village 10 men come to him and stay their distance. They're lepers. 10 men who are lepers, and it says that 10 is the number required for a Jewish synagogue, a gathering, a religious gathering. These 10 are gathered together in their exclusion, in their marginalisation, in their suffering, in their illness, in their leprosy. And the leprosy of the day could be any skin irritation, mild through to severe, that was considered maybe contagious and dangerous to the wider community. And these people couldn't participate in the common life. And so they stayed apart. And when Jesus walked through, they called from a distance and said, "Hey, Master, do something for us, set us free, And Jesus turns to them and says, "Go and show your priests your body, that you're clean, and go in peace." The process was that they would need to go and show themselves to the priest, and the priest would look at them and ensure that they were now clean and they could re-enter the life of the community well. And the priest did what they did, and people re-entered life. But they had to take the step of faith. When they still looked at their skin, it was still unclean. It's when they started the journey that they discovered they were cured. 9 of them kept going to the priest, but 1 of them returned to Jesus and started giving thanks, praising God for what he'd experienced through this Jesus, and gave thanks and knelt before him. And Jesus says, weren't there 10? And why is this one the only one that's come back? And he's a Samaritan. This one was the outcast of the outcasts. The 10 were Jews and a Samaritan. Joined together, the enemies were joined together by their common suffering. But now, the Jews went their way. They went back to the system that was. They embraced the old traditional system, the system that had excluded them, the system that wanted them to conform to the ways of their world. The Samaritan came back and recognised that in Jesus was a different way. And when Jesus blessed him, he said, "Go well, go in peace, go and be healed." Not just cured of your disease, but connected into this way, this being of God, this life of God. And that's what salvation is, being connected into God and the way and the life and the being of God. This one was truly healed and understood the freedom and the life that came in being healed. He didn't go back to submit to the cultures and the systems of the world, but walked the borderlands, if you like, with Jesus, the alternate way. And this is the way we're invited into. The way of life and hope and truth. A difficult way. A way that challenges us. A way that challenges our world. In Jesus' time, he challenged the systems of the world because he lived with freedom and no one could push him in and conform him to culture or systems or beliefs, ways or religious, political, anything. He lived freely in the way of God. And no one could make him conform. And that was vital. And that's what he invites us into. And it's not a comfortable way, because people all around us will want us to think and be and act like they do. Conform to the systems that hold us all, trapped and enslaved in some way, killing something of our soul each day as we give into it. And we're invited into the way of freedom and life. But it takes courage. It takes courage and it takes a will and it takes faith. And this is the way that Jesus invites us. And it's a way that's beyond even many of our churches, our politics, our ways of wealth and power and fame and career and all of that. It's a way of life, grounded in this way of Jesus, which is love, compassion, justice, peace and inclusion. Is walking the alternative path with Jesus. And that's our invitation. Just like that young man who loved English literature and wanted to share that wisdom he'd gained with the world. Amen.